Welcome to the Modern CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping accounting firms achieve success. If you're an accounting firm owner who wants to learn how to grow your firm by providing virtual CFO services, then this podcast is for you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's podcast. Today, we have a Dope CFO on the line with us here. So we're really excited to get right into this. This is Andrew Hunzicker, and his firm is actually called Dope CFO. So we're going to get a little bit more into that name and what he does. But before we get too far into it, Andrew, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and kind of talk about how you got to where you are today?
Okay. Just guess the quick story would be got my CPA in 95 and was in, like many of us, in Big Four, was in Dallas at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then actually switched to Grant Thornton to move, like you said, moving to where I wanted to move, Oklahoma City, which was where my original home was there. And like many of us Big Four, I rolled out to a client as CFO literally on the first day of this century. I think it's January 2nd of 2000. And I was there for 10 years, oil and gas CFO. My boss and myself founded separately a drilling company in 2006 with private equity. And we did an exit of that company in 2010 to Chesapeake Energy. And when that happened, I basically packed my bags and I moved where we vacation, which is Bend, Oregon. And I still live here today. So it's kind of a vacation town. And we have a ski area, et cetera. So it's lived here the last 11 years and been CFO on my own since then. Accidentally got into the cannabis space when Oregon was one of the first states to legalize. There was a lab here that needed help doing due diligence, and so started helping them. And it just one thing led to another CFO job. It was very interesting space. Nobody, especially in the CPA side at that point, would even touch cannabis, but I thought it was actually pretty fun. I'd been helping high-tech companies out here who typically, the way I describe high-tech companies, they've all got Harvard MBAs. They all tell you they know more about accounting than you do. I'm talking about the founders, but they're all broke. They have no money and they're raising money. Cannabis, conversely, the CEOs are often, in their 30s. They're pretty cool. They'll tell you they know nothing about accounting and tax. And by the way, they got $8 million because they're well funded. And so
love those clients.
On money, which they make great clients.
And good customer appreciation nights. I don't know. Like, yes. I was expecting a different story into how you got started there. But yeah, that's pretty amazing. I mean, so were you scared off at all at the beginning? Because we were kind of talking about how the AICPA now is kind of opening up and really embracing it now. And, it's only a matter of time before it's kind of whatever everywhere. But every time you would like go and look up any kind of guidance, they'd always be like, nope.
We don't touch it. And the Journal of Accountancy has told me like 3 different times they won't write about it, but then I'll email them back. It's like, oh, I actually saw an article you put in there. I've written for Accounting Today 3 times, but we're AICPA now is finally putting on a fall conference November 8th at Caesars in Las Vegas for 2 days. It's all cannabis. Most of the other big national firms you've heard of are helping put on the conference. So a lot of players are there. And so, many CPAs early on were just like, we're not touching this with a 10-foot pole. They were scared of it, et cetera. I didn't care as much because I had already, I'm almost 60. I had kind of semi-retired. I really wasn't that concerned. I can take whoever client I want. I only work part-time as well since I've been here. So I wasn't as worried, but it's funny, the firms, even like Bend, Oregon, where I live, 100,000 people, none of the CPA firms at first would touch it. Now every last one of them has clients. And so I think what happens with most firms across the US as we expanding rapidly eastward, you say, oh, I'm not going to touch it. And then you just start turning clients away left and right. And then you're like, wait a minute, maybe I should do this. Maybe it's actually lucrative. It's, we talk about niches. vastly underserved by CPAs still. It's a little bit complex. These clients, a single client can easily be mid six figures, just one client, and those fees growing. So yeah, it makes a great niche. And this is mom and pop, where, your average 1 to 2 dispensary chain with maybe a farm on the side is a $10 million company. So they're not like getting a coffee shop client or whatever.
Yeah, they've actually got the ability to pay and just need that extra. Now, do you find that most of them, whenever they're either on the retail side or the seed side, or do you find that that's usually kind of?
It's all over. And so really so dispensaries and farms are the biggest side, but you'll find the cannabis companies themselves, they start figuring out really quickly, because of the punitive tax laws, it's very advantageous for them to vertically integrate if the state allows it, which many do. And so more often than not, even if you start off with a dispensary, they're going to add a farm. The next thing farms add is the chemical processing to make the oil. Then they start making products. Some of them have delivery companies or distribution. And so you'll often find in mom and pop 8 to 10 legal entities and vertical integration as well. So it definitely got some complexity. Cost accounting's involved for certain, and there's tax and compliance issues. There's the cash and banking issues. There's software issues, because a lot of the software won't serve the niche. And so you can either look at it as, oh, this is just a total mess, I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole, or it's got a ton of opportunity and high paying fees as well.
So if you do all that valuation and kind of look at it and say, I think this is something I do want to go down. So other than attending that conference in November, where else would you get started? Because like you said, there's a lot of regulation. There's a lot of special things you need to understand in order to get into this industry. Where would you recommend someone start?
Well, not to plug us, but dopecfo.com, you'll find, we've got a complete program that's it's not just education, it's actually all the tools as well. We've built all the tools and work papers, from engagement letter, controls documents, charts of accounts, cost accounting templates. So if you're really interested, we've got a complete package. You can, but even if you just want to check us out for the free side, we have tons of blogs and info that cover lots of different topics, and that the conference in November will be awesome as well. There'll be so on the fall conference, there's going to be some tracks more for the small CPA firm that wants, get in the space. And then there'll be about half the tracks are for bigger firms that want to go down the assurance, audit, advisory, M&A, public filings, which will be coming along, once we can get this thing legalized. Just saw that the House today introduced a bill to fully decriminalize cannabis. So we're moving quickly, both state front and federally. And so we actually saw this with CBD and hemp legalized completely in 2018. And so there's a decent chance that cannabis will go down that path as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and totally to plug your website. I mean, it a couple of years ago, whenever we picked up our first client, like, you were the only resource out there. Like I said, you couldn't go. Everywhere else was saying, disclaimer, don't do this. And you all were great about sharing information, getting out in front of everybody, saying, this is what you need to do. This is how you do it. Like you mentioned, the programs on there. There really isn't any other resource out there like that. I mean, I know you're trying to change that and working with the AICPA and stuff, but definitely that is, and that's the place to go.
Yeah, we have, and there are a couple other, there's a EA group that does some tax return stuff, CPE as well, John Shealy's group. And then also, just if you want to, my Instagram actually just started this recently. It's at Dope CFO 1. So I put a 1 on the end of it, and I'm putting out a lot. I'm basically connecting daily and doing webinars or whatever, the latest news in the industry, or really, I needed some place where I could just talk daily. There's so much going on. It's funny, 5 years ago, we kind of have a big news story every month. It's every day. You're reading about a new state or a new bill or a new whatever, and you can hardly keep up with all the stuff going on in the space.
Where do you see the industry heading? Like you said, as it gets more nationally accepted, I can't help but to think, and this is what I was thinking a couple of years ago. It's like all the big players, that are getting kicked out of their space are like obviously see the it would just seem like there'd be a lot of consolidations coming. I don't know. Like,
yeah, there'd be tons of M&A. And I think if you go out like 30, 40 years, I think you're going to see a ton of similarities to the craft brew industry and wineries. And so, wineries have been around for hundreds of years, and you could still open a winery. I mean, I know 2 or 3 wineries here in Bend, Oregon that have opened in the last 5 years. So you can still, 50 years from now, open up a cannabis farm and develop a brand. And so I think on the product side, if you're a farm or a processor, or you make a product, which could be beverages, could be foods, could be lotions, whatever, the brands are going to end up winning out in the long term. We may see 100 different power bars with CBD in them, but there's just going to be a few winners in the space. Same on the marijuana and strains. There are going to be people that want certain strains and don't want others. The dispensary side, in the long term, I mean, it's kind of like, depending if we go down the social where you can have like a pub and we can actually go smoke pot and drink beer and hang out. But if it's just to go buy some pot or whatever, there's already delivery companies like Dutchie that will it's like pizza, just you can go online, pick what you want, they deliver to your door in 20 minutes. And so, by the way, Dutchie was founded out of Bend, Oregon. It's a $1 billion company at this point. They
Wow.
And I know the 2 founders are like, I don't know, young 30s, and they acquired Greenbit's, a huge POS system, and Leaf Logics. And it's crazy to see some of these companies, go from nothing to billions of dollars in a couple of years.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering if like big business would kind of consume the market and
they will. And so, I think so. Dutchie, which was just founded by a group here that really 2 young brothers, and they acquired Greenbits, which was this huge POS company. And some, I know, Kraft macaroni and cheese, they had acquired a $25 million stake in FlowHub, another POS system. And so right now, just you can look at software in cannabis, there's just hundreds of accounting solutions, POS systems or whatever, just for cannabis that are pretty big dollar deals. And then on the farm or dispensary side, there's going to be tons of gobbling up of companies, but then there will also, I think there's always going to be the craft smaller player.
Yes, I was going to say, because even with beer, you have the craft breweries, you have the craft companies, but of course, there's always Bud Light and Coors and some of the big players out there too. So it's going to be interesting to see who takes that path and kind of how they do it.
and that's a great Budweiser. In our town, Bend, Oregon, we have like I think 20 craft breweries here because it's a resort town, and Budweiser came in and gobbled up one of them for I think there was a $90 million acquisition.
Wow.
But still the other ones are still going strong. So it's.
So still a ton of opportunity to help some of these less sophisticated business owners in terms of their financial sophistication, help them kind of get straight. Now that there's more guidance out there, hopefully they'll get a little tax relief too. We'll see. But once they get that, it will be kind of a good normal business is what you're saying. Like you can get into cost accounting if you're on the, more on the production side, and then, retail. So it's still kind of got the normal business model, just in a very exciting time.
Yeah. And it's just, since it's not just one niche, it's actually, we were talking about this at the AICPA, it's actually a new industry, a birth of an industry, because you have sub niches, like you could specialize in farming or retail or labs or whatever. You got these sub
or the paraphernalia. Yeah, we had somebody come out and they're doing that. So
you got all these different sub niches, and we're seeing that people like, oh, I'm just going to focus on dispensaries, or I'm just going to focus on product manufacturers. So there's all that side of it. And then even when we legalize, like we saw with CBD hemp, there's just massive compliance. They have to deal with the FDA, the USDA, OSHA as well, those kind of issues. And states have every state has their own rules for these companies. The FDA is treating CBD and THC like a medical drug, since they're being tested and used for real medicine, and which means there's going to be a lot of compliance. There's a lot of CBD sold illegally across the U.S. right now. as well as Delta 8 THC products. So it's kind of the Wild West still. Someday things will be controlled, but yeah, buyer beware what you may buy a CBD product and think it's CBD. There might not be a drop of CBD in there because the FDA is way behind on catching and shutting these companies down.
So with it kind of being the wild, wild west, I guess, as a CFO, that gives you a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of things you can do. So obviously your niche is in the cannabis industry, but what is your niche within your niche? Like, what do you do for cannabis companies? Do you try to do everything, or do you try to specialize in compliance or whatever the area they need is?
So our basic Dope CFO, people that come in our program, we tell them to, as opposed to going to a cannabis company and say, hey, I'll be your book. So we have every skill set in our program. We have bookkeepers, we have CPAs, we have enrolled agents, we have CFOs. But instead of saying to the client, hey, I'll be your part-time CFO, or I'll be your bookkeeper, or I'll do your tax return, we go in and pitch, hey, we're going to outsource your accounting and tax department from start to finish, and here's your monthly fee is X. And we're going to do everything, which is what the client wants to hear. I mean, bookkeeping, data entry, controller work, CFO work, tax planning, tax returns, the whole ball of wax. And oh, by the way, we'll help you with HR and payroll and your cash issues and even compliance with your state. They'll pay. These cannabis companies either need a compliance officer or an accountant can pick that up real easily. It's not that complex, and they'll pay you. Some people will pay you more for the compliance help than they will for the accounting help, just to maintain their license, et cetera. And so and then you can, if you're a solo person and say you're a CFO, you can outsource the bookkeeping and tax returns to someone else in the community or whatever.
Are you interested in offering virtual CFO services at your firm or scaling your existing service offerings? The Virtual CFO Playbook, How to Land $60,000 a Year Clients and Provide a Killer Client Experience, is an online series of modules that will equip you with essential tools for creating and delivering scalable VCFO services. These approaches have helped Summit CPA grow from $500,000 to upwards of $5 million in revenue over the past decade. If you're ready to grow your firm, visit summitcpa.net/VCFO Playbook to enroll now.
Any idea of what kind of range of fees, for listeners thinking, hey, what is this kind of market? I mean, I'm sure it's all over the place and the complexity and the size can vary, but kind of an average engagement kind of look like?
It's all over, but really the mom and pop is going to be six figures. So I often use in Bend, Oregon, where we're 80,000 people here. We have 23 dispensaries, but a client that's 2 dispensaries, opening a third. He's got a little coffee shop, just bought half a farm. It's $12,000 a month fee. He's doing, $8 million in sales. He's got 50 employees. What else? He's 8 legal entities. So you'll find many times you can go, there'll be a dispensary in Boston and you're like, oh, it's a single entity. I'm going to come in to do the accounting. And you're going to find out they've got 8 legal entities because attorneys are telling them to set up all these multi-entity structures. And so we got 8 sets of books, 8 tax returns. And so the way we price quote, we have a price quoting tool. We're going to look at forward revenues. We're going to look at how many legal entities, how many verticals they're in, any consolidations, and the more complexity, that just keeps adding our fee up, what kind of compliance help they need. And so very typical, I mean, you can even be mid 6 figures with mom and pop. Again, I think Tammy in Boston, she's not a CPA. She has a single dispensary client that's paying her about $200 a year.
Oh, wow.
Without even having her CPA, and that's just one client. Again, just because they're in this $10 to $20 million range. And these, in my opinion, if you're going to offer all in accounting, CFO, and tax for a $10 to $20 million company, they should be paying somewhere between 150 to 200 up to 400 or 500 a year, 500,000 a year in accounting, CFO, and tax. And the way I compare it to when I go back to my oil and gas days, we had a 10 to 20 million a year company. My boss, he paid me as a CFO almost $500,000 a year. I had a controller making 200. I had 7 accounting staff making almost 100 each. We took up half the space of a building. And oh, by the way, we outsourced audit and tax to Grant Thornton. So in the old days, totally common for a 10 to $20 million company to be spending way over $1 million in accounting and tax and CFO. But in today's day and age, we can outsource most of that and still provide great service, but simplify our life for the client.
I'm sure everybody listening is lighting
drooling
up right now. Yeah, pun intended.
Yeah.
They're lighting up.
When I talk to someone who says they're staying away, I'm like, this is, and I'm almost 60 again. If you're a younger accountant or CPA, I talked to my niece this morning that just passed her first part of her CPA exam. What better time to get in with all the remote tools we have and all the internet, et cetera, Zoom rooms, plus the birth of an industry. We will not see a birth of an industry like this in our lifetimes again, even if you're 20, probably. And so you got this underserved niche, really high average fees for mom and pops, and humongous growth. There's about 100,000 companies in the US right now in CBD and cannabis. That number will easily be 500,000 companies in 2 or 3 years. And so, lots and lots of opportunity.
So obviously to Adam's point with his great joke there, but so you're talking about an engagement let's just use your first example, it's 12,000 a month. Like, how many hours, team members are you thinking it's taken to serve something like that?
Not that many. So it depends on what they've already got over there. So like in this one in town, and this actually went back to 2014. They already had a full-time bookkeeper. She had no clue how to do cost accounting or half the things, but that was okay. They loved her. She's super nice. So I just trained her. And so she still does all the day-to-day bookkeeping and data entry. And so on the CFO side, it's maybe, 4 or 5 hours a week at most. We find for most clients, whether it's a startup or, really messy cleanup, the first 6 months is going to be pretty intense. But then even as the fees start to grow after month 6, as they're growing, the work effort can actually go down once you put some systems and controls in place. We'll use their staff as well. So things like inventory counts, any kind of thing like uploading invoices, receipts, bank documents, or whatever, we'll have people that are not accountants doing a lot of that stuff as well.
Yes, I know.
Do you find being on site is important, or is this a really good opportunity for remote work, like you kind of talked about before, even with the farm?
We pitch fully remote. That's part of our call with prospects, and we let them know, hey, you're never going to see us in person, even if you're down the street. We do all this stuff remote. We find it adds more value to our time. I learned that being on my own 11 years. I started realizing, gosh, this time at the client was, maybe it gave them a little more comfort, but generally I wasn't getting any work done when I was at the client. I had to go home to do it. And so nowadays it's just like, look, we work remote. In my mind, if you pick any niche, the whole entire idea of specializing in a niche is you can have a national practice from day one. And your basic selling point is, I'm in Oregon, but say I find a farm over there in Indiana, I'm going to say, look, you can use Adam at Summit CPA, but he's a generalist. He doesn't know anything about cannabis accounting. Or you can hire me. I'm going to do your accounting right. We're going to get your taxes correct. We're going to improve your cash flow, make you audit ready all the time. And so it's kind of that compelling pitch that what does the client really want at the end of the day?
I'm going to tell him that I took your course and I'm just as good as he is now because I got all of his secrets.
That's a sales guy
and he'll support me if I need it. So
it is funny. I mean, the whole niche idea was so new to me. And I think for decades, whether it was Price Waterhouse or Grant Thornton or just Joe CPA, we all bragged to everybody that we could do everything in nonprofit, retail, and every last niche. And then someone along the line figured out, wait a minute, what if I just specialized in a niche? And actually, you can earn higher fees. Your life is easier. I unfortunately paid somebody $7,000. I joke about that. I took a marketing thing. I saw a Facebook ad. I got on the phone with this guy who's pretty well known at this point. He wasn't then. He talked me out of $7,000 on the phone. My visa, my wife almost killed me. She Googled him after I gave him $7,000. Is like, this guy's a nobody. But I tell people, he told me to pick a niche and become an expert. That was the only thing he told me that I didn't already know. And it was great advice because at the time I had never even crossed my mind to pick a niche.
Yeah.
Great lead in for our listeners, because actually that's our next podcast. We're going to focus specifically on that, like what it means to be an expert and kind of those higher prices you can get, a higher price point you can get. And then obviously everybody can do the math on what you just said. You know, you're talking $500, $600 an hour on a niche, where when you're a generalist, there's no way you're getting that. There's no way you're getting hear that. It's because you're the expert and you're their safety net, and that's what they're paying for. They're paying for the fact that you understand the industry, and when something comes up, they're going to call you and you know the answer. So that's what they're paying for, is that premium. So
great point. And kind of that CFO side of just these cannabis owners are dealing with so many headaches, whether it's cash and banking or software or whatever. And if you can take away accounting, HR, tax, compliance, they will love you. They've got enough headaches to deal with.
Well, the nice thing too, I think, is, you know, you worry sometimes about the market being crowded by us. I definitely think it's a blue ocean. Obviously, it's expanding, but even the big hitters in our space, they still haven't really caught on to how to deliver personal service. And so they're still gonna, like you said, they're gonna start adding all this compliance piece to everything. And the bigger firms are probably going to just gravitate towards audit, compliance, maybe tax, and they're going to leave all of this extra value add stuff for smaller firms. So I still think there's plenty of room to get in and make a big impact and be able to double down in this space.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it'll be interesting to see what happens over time. But these companies need good books because, like you said, whether they're all either going for an exit or an M&A, or they're going to be audited by the IRS or whatever the case may be, or audited by their bank. They need good accounting and good financials. And it just still today, I think about 9 out of 10 cannabis companies don't even have close to good records.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we're getting close on time here. So I'm just going to take a quick second to throw our email address out there. So I do believe we found Andrew through our email, and we would love to hear from other people that would love to be a guest in the show. I think this has been a great episode. So I'd love to hear from more people that would love to join the show and think they'd add value to our listeners. So that email address is cpa@summitcpa.net. Again, cpa@SUMMIT CPA.net. So love to hear from people. And again, if you have ideas for the show as well, email us there. So love to hear some final thoughts. Both you, Andrew, and you, Adam, what are some final thoughts you have for our listeners?
Well, first of all, Andrew, I apologize. I have my Blockbuster shirt in the other room from whenever I visited Bend, Oregon, and went to the last Blockbuster. So I made sure. We didn't know each other at the time, but if I make my way back there, we'll definitely have to go to go somewhere and hang out. But I think that I don't know, for me, and we talk about this a lot. We've done it with our own firm, and we really talk a lot about not only finding a niche, but then becoming a subject matter expert. And Andrew, I think you're a prime example of being able to do both. And so, you know, hats off to you for not only getting into the space and becoming the expert, but then sharing with everybody else and creating these courses and giving people a foundation for, you know, because especially as accountants, we're not super creative people. We need, you know what I mean? We need some guardrails around some of this stuff, and then we can get going. And so I just want to thank you for, you know, having Dope CFO out there and providing that training and insight, because again, it's helped us as well. So.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, I just, whenever I teach in my programs or others, it's just like the way I look at it, most businesses in the world, you've got to have a physical location and real estate and inventory and fixed assets and all these costs. But luckily for accountants, we just need a laptop and a phone, basically an internet connection. And so what's our asset? It's ourselves, our knowledge, our education, our skills, our tools. Invest in that just all the time. And it can be as simple as listening to a podcast like this and getting new ideas that can be free, to taking CPE or programs or writing degrees or whatever it is. You just build that knowledge up, and it will translate into more value to your clients, and you will hopefully be successful.
Awesome. Well, definitely thank you for joining the show. I'm gonna take the last word here and I'll let Adam jump in and say that obviously Grant Thornton alumni are the best podcasters because both of us are obviously Grant Thornton alumni. So we'll have to find some more to get on the show. So I appreciate you joining us.
Yay. Yes. Had a great time there.
Thank you.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving modern CPA firm success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.